Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our monthly series, TBL Research Rabbit Hole, where we interview researchers and staff members on little research tangents or rabbit holes that they've uncovered while researching here at the Thomas Balch Library. I'm here with Tamsyn, who is our senior library associate, and while she was researching St. James Episcopal Church here in Leesburg, she uncovered a rather fascinating story. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to her.
Hi. So I was reading through our oral history collection, which I really recommend if you want to know about turn of the century Loudoun. And I was reading through the history of a man named John E. Barry, who lived in Vinegar Hill. And he was talking about his grandparents, Joseph Waters and Easter Harris, and mentioned that Easter's brother, Phillip Harris, had been raised in the Laurel Brigade Inn by the Mott family. And this name was very familiar to me because Easter Harris shows up in the St. James Episcopal registry. This is her baptism date. And so I started looking further, looking for traces of Phillip and Easter, and I found in our Ethel Litteljohn collection this document. And this document's from the 1st of January in 1848, and Robert Bentley, who's a merchant here in Leesburg, is selling 2 children to his daughter Virginia for $1. So this is a gift to Virginia, who has just had her first child in late 1847. You can see it says that Easter is 9 years old, and Philip, it looks like they've written 9 and put 7 over the top. So we know they were born around 1839 and 1841. So I don't think they go to live with the Motts immediately. I think they stay with their mother Caroline in the Bentley house for a few years because they don't show up in the Mott correspondence. We have a huge collection of Virginia Mott's letters to and from her husband Armistead Mott, who was a doctor here in Leesburg. And during the Civil War, Armistead is put in charge of the Confederate hospital here in town, and then he winds up getting deployed out. Another officer writes to his commanding officer and says that Armistead is too distracted by his medical duties here in town and needs to be sent away from Leesburg. So when Armistead leaves Leesburg, he takes Philip with him as a young man in his early 20s. And Philip is officially his manservant, while Easter, Philip's sister, stays home as nursemaid to the youngest of the Bentley children. I think the Motts rather, and I think they've got around 6 children at this point in time. But in the letters back and forth between Virginia and Armistead, we get glimpses into what Philip is doing and what Easter is doing back home. And Philip seems to have been immensely resourceful. Armistead writes at one point that he's had a harrowing ride all night long, but that Philip has gone on ahead of him, presumably by foot, and somewhere managed to source hot corn cakes and ham for breakfast by the time Armistead rolls up. Armistead is always reassuring Virginia that he's doing well because Philip is taking good care of him, and Philip has lined his blankets. He's in Tennessee in November of one year, and he says that Philip has found apples somewhere and has made apple dumplings and is proving to be an excellent pastry chef. And this whole time Philip is not only stitching blankets and foraging for food, he's also having to take care of Armistead's horse and transport the horse from place to place. You do get the sense very much that Virginia is very worried that Philip might self-emancipate. And Virginia is very aware that there are lots of possibilities, especially when they're close to Union troops. So she's sending all these messages to Philip in her letters to Armistead. Tell Philip his mother says she's so proud of him for being so loyal and faithful. and tell Phil that Easter says she's not getting married while he's gone. She's going to wait till he comes home so he can be there. And they also convey messages like Philip's mother is called Caroline Harris, and in one of these letters, Caroline is requesting that Phil send her some tobacco as soon as possible because she'd like some. And I should note that John Barry says of Caroline Harris that it was believed she was Native American, and that's the tradition that came down in their family. Whereas back home, we do get an idea of Easter's duties. I first came across her in the letters when she's 13, 14 years old, and she has apparently been forced to be a guest at a tea party that Molly Mott is throwing. Molly's about 3 at this point, and Easter is there along with Mary West, who is the principal nursemaid for Molly. Virginia talks about Easter out raking up the garden, getting ready to plant vegetables in April, talks about her getting the little girls ready to go out in their spring finery with their little boots on. At one point, quite late in the war, after Virginia's been reporting that all of her friends' servants are leaving, and by servants she means enslaved people, she says, Easter is a treasure, if only we can keep her. And she actually gets quite angry at John Janney here in town because John Janney has been suggesting positions for some of the African American people in Leesburg out in Washington, D.C. and giving them train tickets, which Virginia thinks is very unfair because she might lose Easter. That said, Easter still has a lot of freedom of movement. Virginia's sending her up to Point of Rocks to get trade goods, cotton and things, and come back again. So Philip never leaves. He does come back to Leesburg, and I think it's because his mother, his sisters, his brothers are all back here. And while Philip is out trailing around with Armistead Mott, making sure he has cozy blankets, there's another Loudoun young man who is also involved in the Civil War, and that man is Joseph Waters. But Joseph, who is born to a freed woman, Louisa Waters, signs up with the 5th Massachusetts Colored Cavalry, and they really did see some action. And Kevin Grigsby has written a lot about the Loudoun men, African American men rather, who signed up to fight. And he points out that a lot of the young men from Loudoun who went to fought for the Union did not return to Loudoun afterwards. Joseph Waters comes back because, again, his mother Louisa is here and his brothers are here. And I believe he has another brother, Armistead Waters, who also fights and returns to Loudoun. Joseph's with the cavalry. I think his older brothers are blacksmiths. He's clearly got a lot of experience with horses. And when he comes back to Loudoun, he becomes a real force in the community. He's one of Leesburg's leaders at the turn of the century. He becomes a trustee of the Bailey Institute, which is a school for African Americans, which is running in the late 19th century. He helps found Mount Zion United Methodist Church. He actually owns quite a bit of property, and apparently his brother-in-law, Phillip Harris, builds a couple of houses, including the Oddfellows Lodge down in the Vinegar Hill area of town. So Philip marries a girl named Maria Moss, and her sister actually marries one of Joseph Waters' brothers. The families are very interconnected in a lot of ways. Now, one of the things that Virginia says in her letters to Armistead, she says, "Tell Philip that we are so grateful for him being so loyal and good that when he comes home, we're going to throw him a big party, and we're going to throw him a wedding in the front room if he likes." And I haven't been able to find any records of this big wedding or party, but I did find Philip's wedding recorded. Can you find him? Is it here?
Yes.
Philip Harris marrying Maria Moss when he comes back in 1866. So he got his wedding.
Yeah.
And about 5 years later, his sister Easter marries Joseph Fortis. John Berry, Easter's grandson, says that he regrets that he never got to know his grandmother Easter. She dies a few years before John is born, but I think she must have had an outsized influence in her family circle because so many of her descendants are named for her, and John Berry's middle name is Esther, after his grandmother. So yeah, Phillip and Easter Harris, which show up in all these letters and documents. So if anyone's interested.
Yes, fantastic. And we will put all of these collections in the description of the post here. But it's fascinating that it all kind of starts with that oral history from our oral history collection, and it expands out through multiple collections. So thank you, Tamsyn, for that fantastic overview.